everyone, and welcome to our InPower Coffee Break. It's time to tap your personal power and pull up a cup for this episode of the InPower Coffee Break. I'm Mary Brody with InPower Coaching, and today we have on Dana Theus and Sharon Miller, and we're here to talk about how to dig deeper to find your passion. And this was based off of an article in the Muse, and we're also going to link this over to the Fluid Career and how to find that as well. So we hold these coffee breaks live every Tuesday at noon Eastern and 9 a.m. Pacific to explore InPower topics and strategies that help you achieve work-life satisfaction and lead in a pro-human workplace. So join us live, watch and listen to past recordings at coffeebreak.InPowerCoaching.com and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes at InPower Coffee Break. So now let's start the discussion. So I don't know if either of you had an opportunity to take a peek at the article, but maybe we start there.
I took a quick look and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed to me like it was addressing a common challenge that I hear from clients and from people in my life all the time, which is like, I'm not sure what my purpose is. I'm not sure what my passion is, and I don't know how to find it. And some people will get themselves really tied up in knots over this, like, oh, I should have, I should want to write the great American novel, or I should want to, do something huge, right? And success is always clearer in 2020 hindsight. Going forward, it's less clear. Although I do believe that passion and purpose is really important to success. We can talk about that. But the article seemed to be kind of going back to what we were talking about, Sharon, before this, which is like, take it down to baby steps. Like, you don't have to know how to solve world hunger to have a passion for helping people who are hungry. And that's really the key, is to tap into that thing that interests you and that excites you and follow that as your passion. So that's kind of what I took the article to, is sort of like, hey, step it down, don't need to panic. Just look at what you like doing and follow that. Was that your interpretation?
That was my interpretation as well. This brings up, from our pre-conversation, what I was going to add was my uncle gave me advice, and he always had off-color things to say, or colorful, depending on how you look at it, right? And one of the things he would tell me all the time, when I'd come back, I'd get very discouraged, and he'd say, I'd be like, well, I just was doing something, and I thought it was a waste of my time, and I didn't like it, and da-da-da-da-da. And I would get all like, will I ever find, like you said, will I ever find my life passion? Oh my God, I'm 22, and my life, I only have 60 years. What the hell? So I was like getting all panicked. And my uncle used to say to me, well, now you know what you don't like to do. So you narrowed it down.
Yes.
Now
you know. Right. And that, if I may interject on that one, that's exactly right. And again, alluding back to our pre-conversation, and that adage, do what you love and love what you do. And so I think we all know, what we do like, right? And we just don't, but we get ahead of ourselves, as Dana was saying, and we want to know what it's called and which direction it will take us. And, how do I know when I'm searching for a job, like, what does that job title mean? And, I see that it does the things that it has the things that I think I want to do, but look where it's, it's called this. And, people get so hung up on the nomenclature and the title and the qualifications and all that. And I try to tell, especially, I could go through this myself as well, guiding my children. It's like, look and see what it is they're asking you to do. Everything else, the rest of it is the noise. If that touches in something that you've done or you feel that you can accomplish, or you could bring to the table, or you could improve upon, then go from there. Because different companies it's the same thing, it's just called different things in different companies sometimes. And I've worked with them also to take their story and help them realize that while they may not think they have the skills that match the corporate skill set based on their past experience, they in fact do. Customer service is different things in different, in different forms and functions. So I help them build a story to let them see how what they've actually done in their past life really can apply to their corporate life. And then, in addition to that, again, don't get hung up on the title. Don't get hung up on the company. Just look and see tap into what you're good at and what you think you can bring to the table. To your point, Mary, they've tried that in one particular job. One daughter absolutely knows what she doesn't like. You don't know until you try it.
So where does passion enter into that advice, Sharon?
Well,
how do you use passion to help you in that search?
Exactly.
I was going to say, you passionately know you don't like stuff.
Right. Well, your passion can be, that's true. I mean, as funny as it sounds, you can be absolutely passionate about knowing what you don't want to do, and sometimes you don't really, while you have an interest, it really turns into a passion if you don't know what that is going in. When you get in there and you roll up your sleeves, you can find that you actually really love what you're doing. And you don't know what it's called before you get there, right? And if you're finding joy, accomplishment, and sometimes that also comes externally. Passion sometimes is built from an external attaboy, pat on the back, great job. The more accolades you get and recognition for what you're doing, that can also, those external comments can also help bridge and build your own passion internally. But if you truly feel like you want to, quote unquote, solve world hunger, help other people, do good work, do service, there's a natural path that can take you there. One can look in the nonprofit world, for example. For people, that want to follow that type of path, you might need to, you can think externally again. Do I need to go back and get a master's degree so I can go ahead and be reputable when I apply to this nonprofit, if you will? Or maybe, based on the volunteer work that I've done in the past, because I enjoy helping people and want to do service, if getting paid for it is just a piece of the pie. Passion doesn't come with a price.
Well, so let me go back and pull out a thread, I think, in what we're talking about here that's worth looking at, because the title of this session is Going Deeper into Passion, right? And I have come to understand that differently later in my career than I did earlier in my career. And part of what I do now is try to help people understand the thing that I missed, which is kind of related, I think, Sharon, to what you were saying. And you get in and you find out what you don't like. But what we do is we get stuck on what we don't like, and we forget to attach to what we do like and then pull the secret out of that. And I'll give you an example. So early in my career, I was doing policy work because I wanted to make a difference. And I thought, working on international and federal policies would do that. And it was kind of a power kick, I like that. But then there were things I didn't like about it. So I got an opportunity in marketing. So I went to marketing, and I was kind of enjoying that, but I wasn't enjoying it fully. And my career was about 8 years of trying to figure out, what is it I actually like here that I want to do more of, and what is it that I don't like? And so I went through various pieces of marketing, right? I was doing product development, and then I was doing branding, and then I was doing strategic branding. And, I kind of worked myself into the piece that I really liked most, which had to do with identity and had to do with or the identity of organizations that I was working for in marketing. And then I began to realize, well, wait a minute, that identity work isn't exciting to me because of the company. It's exciting because of the individuals, the people. And that's when I transitioned into coaching. So it was like I kept, trying to understand, okay, this is what I don't like. What is it I do like? How do I do more of that? And it evolved, basically led me through, evolving into something 20 years ago, I would never have said I want to be a coach. Wouldn't have occurred to me. But following those joyful things, led me on a journey that has gotten me much closer to what I enjoy doing. And going back to the whole thing of what if I don't know what my purpose is? If you just take those baby steps and be open to where it's leading you, then each job, as you're saying, Sharon, you can find something that you enjoy in it and attach to that. Keep doing that, but let it evolve you. Let yourself grow into that thing you're liking, as opposed to having to say, wow, I want to be an executive coach when I'm 18.
Right.
I would have been credible.
That's right. I didn't wake up one day and say, I want to be the best marketing person in the world.
That's exactly right.
My baby steps of passion led me into marketing in a very similar fashion. While I took a different roadmap, I took the same steps as you did, because I followed a particular passion that I had, and then it led me into my career. And I would never have known, oh, that's exactly what I want to be called, or this is what I want to do. So I think the baby step approach is so critical. It's so critical because it's at the start of the evolvement, and I'm still evolving. Mhm.
I've been working on this article, and there's a long story behind it. I won't get into the story because it's still going on. It's been months and months and months. But one of the things that came up out of it was talking with this one guy. He helps counsel kids who are in the correctional system, right? The youth correctional system, on how to get out of it, right? And what to look at for jobs and work. And one of the things he was telling me is almost what we don't do, and I'd say in this country, right? We definitely don't do it with disadvantaged or challenged youth, is show them all the opportunities to get them to visualize what they could be doing, right? And say what suits them. So one of the examples he uses, he talks to all the kids, and of course, they all want to be a rapper, right? That's all they know. Right. So he gets them to dig deeper, and he's like, okay, so do you have like a demo? And they're like, no. Do you write music? No. So then he's like, okay, so what do you like about music? And he tries to dig to find them a career and get them a mentor. And I think that's one of the things that we don't do is like kids are only exposed to what they see at home, or like, that's why I think every kid wants to be a teacher when they grow up, and then they grow up, they're like, forget that, right? They look at all these other things. Right? That's all you see. That's all you see.
And a lot of the time, we talk about how important education is, but then our education system like drills us down into being good at taking tests. And it's that exposure to those other things. That's what you're talking about, which is a lot of the value of education isn't giving us more information in our heads. It's exposing us to other ways of being, right? And that does two things. One is it opens up a bunch of doors that we might want to walk through. And the other thing it does, it shows us there's always more doors to open up. And sometimes if we get ourselves in a rut, regardless of what kind of education we have, we get ourselves in a rut, we have to go open more doors. We have to go explore more and be okay sitting in the question. One of the things that I liked about that article is it kind of defined passion as interest and engagement, which I tend to call energy. Like when you're scanning all the things on your desk, all the articles and all the things, which one gives you a little energy? That's kind of move in that direction. But the article broke it down into interest and engagement, which I like too. It's kind of more head and heart, So it's like, you need a guide. Well, that guide is that little spark of interest, that energy.
And thinking of the words limits and, limitations and such, it's limitless is the word that we need to use with youth. And for everybody, think of, no boundaries, limitless, right? Versus limitations that so many kids, especially challenged youth, do here, and I think it's changing the narrative and giving them another way of thinking, to your point, right? They're so used to hearing barriers, limits, lack of, that can all be changed to positive nomenclature, positive story, positive narrative for them.
Yeah, and actually, go ahead, Mary.
Oh, no, I was going to add, one of the challenges I think we have too is that, especially with the rise of technology, there's a lot of jobs that just don't exist yet, right? And that's another thing, is that sometimes kids, we will show them the careers that are available, and we don't necessarily also show them what's coming up in the world, right? Like
we don't know.
Right. I mean, but then there are things like, for example, like AI, right? Like a future job that I can see is that you're going to need like psychologists, right? And this gets into soft skills that apply to science. You're going to need psychologists to help make these AIs sound human. Right. And to have value systems, like you're going to have to, or how to develop a value system for an AI, right? Like, and this isn't a job today, but how do we get kids to think about, like, and this is where I get sometimes upset when I hear, how STEM is now becoming everywhere, right? Like they'll say, oh, no, that's not a STEM job. Like, no, they're all STEM jobs now. Technology's everywhere.
It's just like every job is a technology job if you're using a computer, which you are.
That's right.
Right. And like your passion might be, right? Like, let's say someone's passion is in psychology or in sociology or in English, right? You need someone to write up, how does this thing going to communicate? And that's where I think, exposing kids to all these jobs, it'll get their brain going, expose them to the new things coming up. It gets, or new ideas that are coming out in society, gets them thinking, and they see possibility. And I think that comes with passion, right? If you don't have any possibility, you got no passion.
Well, it's really interesting what you said about, so AI, people think only, science, technology. You're right, because AI is going to integrate with humans, right? Human element to that. It's a very similar way. An analogy to that is like, doctors, old school, right? In med school, they would just learn how to treat the patient. They weren't taught so much bedside manner. That's like the soft skills, as you say, the psychology. So important. So you can see I'm bringing a sociological background to this. My interest, similar to Dana, when you started on your journey and you realized when you were in the corporation, it was the people that you were interested in. Not maybe so much the broader organization itself. And I took a similar approach sociologically. I loved seeing people in relation to their environment, and how teams work together, and where I saw people who really had a value system that they were they brought to the table, but because of their own internal peer pressure, they didn't follow suit and really, stay true to their self. When they felt like the team would have poo-pooed on their idea because this person didn't agree, the rest of the team wasn't buying into their idea, or he didn't think that the team would buy into that idea. I mean, that fascinated me, and this sort of led into the conversation a little bit that Mary and I had last week about boundaries and ownership, because there's a lot of psychology behind that too. People's willingness to go the extra mile or not, given where they feel what they own, what their boundary is in a corporate culture. And with AI too, where is AI going to play with collaboration and teamwork? These very humanistic attributes.
Yeah, and actually, so I want to go back to something you said, Mary, and then build on what you're saying, Sharon, which is, so I heard this historian who's written 2 books, one about history of humankind, and the other about the future of humankind. And what he says after looking at the total span of human history, he says the one thing that people today need, and children especially need today, the only skill they need is the ability to change. He said, like, every career that exists today will not exist 20 to 30 years in the same form. Mm-hmm. And I just read an example. There's a Wired piece about journalism. And today's journalists at the New York Times are sitting next to app developers. Like, the writers and the technology people are co-building apps. And they were sort of saying, like, I didn't go to school for this, but we're making it happen. And that's going to be happening more and more and more, which kind of leads us to this idea of the fluid career, is that, we look at where people's careers are going in the real world. What are the trends? Well, the trends are 2 things. One is people are they're going from job to job about every 3 or 4 years on average in the private sector. And that can be within the same company, or it can be between companies. And some of that is driven by technology and speed, but I think a lot of it is driven by what we're talking about right here, which is that the jobs themselves are changing. So you change and you adjust, and you get good at what you're doing, but then either you or the job or both of you kind of need to evolve into the next thing. And, it can feel scary until you recognize that it's a flow. And if you're in the flow and you're following your passion, it'll swish you around that next rock, and we get stuck on an idea of passion that I don't think is realistic, which is that big idea of like, oh my gosh, this is the only thing I ever have to do. And it's really more about just following that excitement, whatever excitement you're having in your job. And sometimes this means bringing things together, right? It's like, well, I'm passionate about writing. I want to write the great American novel, but I'm writing copy, for my marketing brochures. How do I bring those things together? And they don't always come completely together. But following that, maybe you write more creativity into your marketing copy. Maybe you evolve out of writing altogether and you get into video production, because you're following that creative spark to create. And it's going to be different for every person. But when you open yourself to follow it without having to know exactly where it's going, that's when it starts to flow and feel very fluid. And you get enjoyment out of each experience. And then the things you don't like, well, they just flow past you and you go on to the next thing. So it's not about being perfectly happy all the time. It's about, following those things that are pulling you into your next opportunity.
Or taking those steps, as you say, and not being risk averse, not being afraid to take a risk, and not being afraid of change. And sometimes, unbeknownst to people, the individuals themselves, they don't even realize or recognize that they are risk averse or have a fear of change. And they could be, their own block.
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, a little wariness is not a bad idea.
Right.
I mean, I remember a few choices I made. I remember in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, there could be downsides here, and there were. I learned from it, but I could also have taken a different choice and had great options, So, wariness, and particularly when it comes to, this is my experience, being married and having your career affect someone else, you got to factor those things in. So change isn't by itself good, but it's going to happen anyway. So you might as well learn to get used to it. And this ability to follow your passion is your clue. It's your guide. It's helping you decide which step to take forward.
One thing that when you're speaking, this is what is coming up to me. It's almost like how we look at our jobs today has changed in the same way we look at marriage today, right? So marriage, like 100 years ago.
Talking about serial monogamy?
Well, let's look at 100 years ago, right? Like 100 years ago, you got married for economic reasons, right? Or they would have royal weddings to hey, look, our countries can now have a treaty. Those were the ideals, right? Like marriage was a way to solidify a contract for something. And as time has gone on, we've had this love thing. And like you said, we get into serial monogamy because what is love? What is love now? And if you're changing all the time, well, that's going to change too. It's a given, right? And how you define it and how you experience it. And if you're both changing together, that's great. If you don't, sorry, right?
Or you're both changing together, but it's polarizing. It's not, narrow.
Yeah.
Right.
That happens.
And I think with how we approach work now has changed in the same way. Like it's almost like we have the passion element, right? What do you like to do? Right? What do you want to be doing? And I think it's almost like we're looking at life has almost changed. So it's almost inevitable, right? If you look at how marriage has changed, it's almost inevitable that how we view work would change, right? Because we're pursuing more what feels right to us rather than what is economically sound for us.
Well, and the analogy to marriage is dangerous, I suppose. However, I will say that when I was a kid and, my friends' parents and my parents were getting divorced, it was all acrimonious. Like everybody was in a war for money or children or something. And today, when I see people getting divorced, rare, it still happens, but it's much rarer in my experience to have the parents at war. More often, they're kind of like, hey, we grew apart. We still want to have we still have holidays with our children sometimes, we want to be a different kind of family because we want to all be in each other's lives, but we want to be a different kind of family. And so I think that speaks to the whole idea of our beliefs around all of these things are changing. Our willingness to not require everything to be completely to our, to cater to our needs,
Exactly.
And that goes to the job too, right? The job, it's like, okay, I don't have to 100% love this job to be committed to it, to be in it, to be, committing my job hours to it. And then when it's not serving me, I can go on and I don't have trauma about that.
Right. Or back in the day, as, to our first conversation, Mary, when we were talking about guiding our career, you signed on and you stayed for 30 years. You sign the marriage license, you stay on for life. I mean, I'm not true.
It's true.
Judgment call on it, but that's where that's philosophy is also rooted. And so life's changing now. We live in a more modern and ever evolving, and certainly technology has a lot to do with that as well. So, and it doesn't mean just because you release yourself of that job or that person that it's necessarily as Dana said, it doesn't have to be a war. It doesn't have to be bitter. It's not an angry departure. It's a departure that's healthy, for the individual or hopefully for both individuals, for the betterment of the company, for the benefit of the employee.
Yeah, and exactly. I was going to say, I think that element of choice, of personal choice, is entering into all of these things. And I can say I've been married 26 years. We've been actively choosing to stay together each year, knowing we had options not to, because I came from a divorced family. I have divorce in my family history, so does he. So it's like, hey, let's not ignore reality. But the ability to have the choice helps us keep choosing to stay. By the same token, I've had many career changes where I wanted to leave, and they were like, well, can we contract you back for a little while? So it was like a choice to leave, but I didn't really leave. I helped them transition. And then I created bridges that, I'm still using today. So
Wonderful.
you enter choice into the situation, and it doesn't have to be all or nothing. I mean, I think that's, so many people take it as, I'm following my passion, I'm quitting everything, I'm throwing everything away. And that's not really what we're talking about. It's just like, if you think of it more in that evolutionary, choose ways that are win-win, to be, then you find the choices that can allow it all to work out well for everybody.
Right. And you bring to, whether it's a new passion or a new job, a new path, whatever that may be, we're still who we are at our core, right? So you just build upon what you have and bring it to the next thing, it's just called something else, or you're doing it somewhere else, or, so we can't lose sight of, while you may need to build skill set on top of what you have, what you're starting with in this new venture, this new path and journey, is what you've already got internally and what you've developed and who you've developed into to today, So don't think because one has to, or one shouldn't think that because you're following something new, to your point, throw it all away. No, we're building on what you already have and just taking it in a new direction.
That's right. And I will, just to show that nothing is certain, I will say I totally agree with you in those micro steps, right? We're building, but I recently read some research that has shown that over the course of our lifetime, meaning 70 or, like 70 or 80 years, we actually do become new people. Our person, not only does our cellular structure change every 7 years, but our personalities evolve very significantly. And so while in any particular step you're absolutely building, you're in the process of becoming a new person, whether you like it or not.
That is so fascinating and something that I would love to dive deeper with you on, perhaps in a different conversation. I think you're right, because, sometimes you see, it's almost like due to maturity, right? By nature we change, and there may be a red thread there that pops up from childhood. It's like, hey, you still do that thing or whatever. But, the beauty of life is the growth and the change, right? And we certainly do. And that's interesting how that also affects us, so mentally, right? As you said, personality-wise, but also at the cellular level, biologically. So that unto itself would be a wonderful conversation.
I agree. And so what I'll do is I'll take the article link and we'll put it on the Facebook Live post if you're watching on Facebook Live, and maybe, Mary, we can put it on the other, wherever else this appears. And Sharon, I'll send it to you.
Thank you. That would be great.
Cool. I think we're out of time. I think we have.
These go so quickly. I get so fascinated with the topic, and certainly, speaking with you and Mary, the time just flies. So I want to thank you for allowing me to join the conversation today.
Absolutely. It was a blast.
That's good.
So do we need to close out, Mary?
Yes, I was just gonna go do that. I was gonna say thank you guys, and thanks for everyone for tuning into this episode of InPower Coffee Break. Please visit us at coffeebreak.InPowerCoaching.com to see upcoming topics, past recordings, and learn how you can join us live. Thanks very much, and have
a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Bye.